Good afternoon, everybody. Got a late start on the day. Mrs. Sleepyhead over here got back from Hawaii and she's feeling the jet lag. So last night there was some ice and the row covers again got smushed. So we're gonna take care of it, right, Mom?
Yes.
This is the second time I've taken you to fix this row cover. The row cover keeps getting smushed by the elements. I mean, every day is a nice day, but relatively, this day is kind of crummy. It's rainy, it's a little cold. Why are we out here? What's the point? Well, come here, I'll show you. So what this row cover enables us to do, why we spend so much time messing with it, is it allows us to have fresh produce in the winter. So growing right here, this is tot soy. This is it's an Asian green. It's in the mustard family. Man, is it delicious. In the winter, greens tend to get sweeter. And that's because in order to keep their cells alive, they need to make sure that they're not frozen. And just like antifreeze, you put that in the car in the winter, sugar raises the point or lowers the point at which water freezes. So it has to get colder to freeze. So these plants are putting a lot of sugar in their leaves. When we eat them, we can taste that sugar. It's the same reason why we're getting maple syrup right now. It's because that plant is getting sugar into their branches or into their leaves, making it taste delicious. So you really can't get this quality of greens in any other season than the winter. The only trouble is that if things do freeze, then you don't have anything. This is why we've got the row cover. The row cover, especially when it's nice and tight, provides an insulating layer, much like the greenhouse. But we don't have infinite greenhouses. They're expensive to make. This row cover is a lot cheaper. So this row cover provides insulation, and when there's a nice bubble of air, like if over the ones that we've already fixed up, when there's air, they can survive in much colder temperatures. So that's why we mess with this stuff. And we want to make sure that it's nice and tight. So because if it's just covering like this right now, the wind blows over it, it's hitting these plants. It's going to take away a lot of their heat. If we get it nice and tight, make a nice bubble, that the air inside of the row cover is going to insulate those plants and keep them nice and warm. So yeah, that's why we're doing it. Nice job, Mom. We did it. Found another chickweed patch. Get some more for the chickens. Hey everybody, kind of a shorter video on the farm side, so I thought it would be a good opportunity to read you a little story. What I've got is Tom Brown's Field Guide for Wild, Edible, and Medicinal Plants. And I was given this book as a gift from my former boss. And when I first started reading it, I was looking to find out about what kind of wild, edible, and medicinal plants that I could find and eat. So I was a little surprised at this introduction because it's not really at all about wild, edible, and medicinal plants. It's a story from when the author was 12 years old, and I found it to be incredibly profound, and is transformed the way that I view myself in relationship with nature, and I view humanity in relationship with nature. Like what is our place in this world? How do we fit into nature? This story has shaped how I answer that question. So without further ado, I'm just gonna read it to you. I hope you enjoy. Okay, introduction. It was the summer of my 12th year when grandfather said that I must learn to hunt like a man. I had to seek out the truths of the real hunt and understand what the hunt was about, accepting the awesome responsibility and knowing the sacred act the Creator had intended the hunt to be. Certainly I had killed animals in traps and with throwing sticks, but never any big game. Grandfather wanted me to use close-range, primitive hunting techniques to bring me nearer to the actual kill. Previous to this, hunting had just been a matter of fact, with only token thought, prayer, and appreciation given to the killing of an animal. We were young and not very experienced. We meant no disrespect. We just didn't know any better, and our prayers and appreciation were mere imitation of stalking wolf's devotion. There was no awe, intensity of feeling. We were mere babes in the woods, connected to, yet still removed from the soil. We didn't feel the reality of the umbilical cord connecting us and Earth Mother. Grandfather's ambition was to show me the reality of the hunt, of killing and dying, and of appreciation and sacrifice through the only way that it could truly be learned, by doing it. The rules were simple enough. Within 1 week, I was to locate a small deer, track it, stalk it, and take its life. Traps had been so very easy. I had only to set and bait the trap, then walk away and do something else for the rest of the day while the trap did the rest. I was totally removed from the act of killing. The trap provided a supermarket-type effect where the animal was already dead and near ready to cook. The close-range hunt took all of my skills, so much patience, and a tremendous amount of time to complete. It was the real hunt, lost to the hunters of today. Modern hunters kill from long distances. They sit waiting in tree stands or blinds, using binoculars, scopes, and so many other modern devices, all designed to remove the hunter from the actual killing. I strongly doubt if many of today's hunters can track their game, stalk it within a few feet, and finally kill it. Their long-range arrows with compound bows and their high-powered rifles make the task of killing easy. Modern hunters lack the basic and ancient skills, and thus lack the understanding of what the true hunt and hunter is all about. Grandfather did not want me to fall into the same complacency. I began my hunt with many hours of deep thought and introspection, spending time alone to try to put things into perspective. I fasted for 4 days so that I could understand hunger and appreciate the gift of food the deer would provide. I took sweat lodge to purify myself and asked Creator to help me with the hunt. Without the Creator's approval, there would be no hunt and no game. My grandfather helped me through these things so that I would finally understand the sacred act I was about to perform. It was important to make the hunt right in my mind, so that I could prove worthy the gift of life I was about to receive. I had to realize that I was a predator and a very intricate part of creation. I had to recapture my birthright. I left camp in the early morning, armed with a flint knife. I wandered miles away from camp, relying on my inner feelings to guide me to the proper hunting area. I kept careful watch on the tracks and landscapes, looking for signs of a crippled or sick deer. I had to follow the law of the predators. I could not take a healthy animal. Predators kill only those animals that are too sick or weak to survive, thus contributing to the continuation of the herd. I did not want to break that sacred tradition. Finally, my eyes caught the tracks of a small yearling deer with a defect in his right rear leg. He couldn't have weighed over 45 pounds, and I was sure that he could never make it through the summer, far less through the winter. Choosing him as my deer, my gift of life, I prayed that the kill would be quick. I tracked him for hours. His track followed his mother's, but showed much trouble negotiating the tougher areas of the landscape. He tired easily and spent much of his time resting or trying to catch up to his mother. The more I studied the tracks, the more I understood this little deer. His bad leg was not a result of a recent injury, but either some kind of birth defect or an injury that occurred around the time of his birth. After a full day of tracking, it was painfully apparent to me that he could not run, but hobbled away feebly at the approach of danger. My heart went out to this little deer, so desperately hanging on to life, and I grew sick with the thought of what I had to do. For several days I watched the little deer. I became very familiar, almost intimate, with his travels and routines. I tracked him, watched him, slept near him and his mother. I knew where he fed, drank, and played,
Strangely, I felt a part of the little group and was so close, as a matter of fact, that they stopped paying attention to me. Certainly at first they were very skittish, but as the days progressed, they saw me as no threat. I became as natural as anything on the landscape, a very deadly mistake for any deer, even a healthy one. Many times I got within only a few feet of the little one, once even close enough to touch him. So many times I could have killed him, but I wanted a clean kill, and grandfather had said that he wanted me to know my animal intimately. I began to look at the whole affair as a predator, especially when the novelty of the close encounters became commonplace. A huge chess game began to play in my head, with me against the little deer. I watched every move and every look. I knew so much about the deer's movements, even better than they did. Their routine would be the cause and the end of the little deer's life. That same deadly routine became ingrained in complacency. Moving so often the same way, they forget to be aware. A routine that turns into a life-threatening rut happens not only to deer, but to humans as well. I realized that if I ever allowed myself into a rut, it would be certain death, just like it was going to be for the little deer. My thought patterns became abstract, concentrating only on the hunt, the chess game. The life of the deer became the furthest thing from my mind, and the whole hunt lacked any visible emotion. It was as if I were outside the whole situation looking in, watching the hunter come closer and closer to the final act. My hunger was intense, my body tired, and I knew that the final moves had to be taken. I knew of a tree near a distant field where the little deer stood momentarily every day before he crossed the field. The concentration on the field and the heavy cover of the little tree would distract the deer enough for me to make a move without being noticed beforehand. The thrill of the oncoming hunt overpowered all other thoughts and emotions. I strapped the flint knife onto a long, thin stick and took a few flakes of the flint to make it deadly sharp. My moves had been planned and replanned until my head was swimming with the mental practice. I would sit in the tree just before the time of day when the little deer's routine would bring him to the edge of the field. When he got into his usual position, I would drop from the tree and drive my spear through his back and between his shoulder blades, using the momentum of my jump to drive the spear deep. If he didn't die immediately, I would then track him to the point where he did die. I was in the tree, concealed and waiting an hour before the little deer usually came to the field. I had darkened and camouflaged my body with mud and natural herbs. My inner dialogue was shut down with a constant prayer and concentration on the hunt. Every leaf seemed to speak. Not a sound or movement on the landscape went unnoticed. Everything had something important to do with the hunt and could not be overlooked. Every creature, every plant, the weather, wind, and earth were all players in this eternal game of death, of life giving to life. I had to be aware on all levels, physically and emotionally. I had to surpass all thought and allow my instincts and reaction to take over completely. Here he is in the tree. The deer approached the field right on time. His mother was upwind and a few hundred feet downfield. As he had done hundreds of times before, he walked under the tree and stopped to survey the open field. There was no fear in him because nothing in his routine was broken. Nothing on the landscape was out of place. With no thoughts in my head, allowing the predator within to take over, I dropped from the upper branches of the tree onto the small of his back. I thrust the spear through one side of the deer's back, off of my intended mark by a few inches, but he went down. He thrashed, crippled in the hind legs because part of the spinal column had been severed, but still alive. In a fit of rage at my own failure at a clean kill, and fired by the awesome instincts of the predator, I began to choke the little deer to death. It seemed to take hours to kill him. I was half out of my mind with the power of the kill when suddenly my eyes caught the eyes of the deer as he slowly died. A shock came over me as I now regained human consciousness. Coming slowly to my senses, I gazed into the terror of his eyes, my hands trembling as I cut off his breath, my mind racing back to the week before and the way I knew the little deer as my brother. Another shudder from the deer brought me back to his eyes, but this time the terror was replaced by understanding and release. In that moment of intense eye contact, the deer knew that he was to become my life's blood. There was no struggle, only a knowing acceptance. I fell off of him, exhausted. My body shook, not with excitement for the hunt, but with tears. His blood covered me, mixed with my sweat. I grew nauseous at the thought of what I had done. Natural order of things or not, I felt sick and disgusted with the whole killing. I knew this little deer as a brother. I followed him, watched him feed, and slept close to him for many nights. Now, it was over. I had removed this little deer from the flow of life, and I felt no better than a murderer. I could just not make sense of it all, nor could I ever forgive myself for this vicious act, sacred or not. Still sobbing, I threw his body over my shoulder and headed back to camp. He was so light and sickly I could hardly feel his weight. Except for the warm blood that ran down my chest and back, his presence was almost imperceptible. Thoughts raced through my head as I tried to justify his death. Certainly I needed the meat to survive, and his flesh would find rebirth in my flesh. But why did it have to be that way? Why the pain? Why couldn't we just eat plants instead of killing and inflicting pain? I knew killing now. It wasn't easy and removed, like pulling back a bow or the trigger of a gun, allowing the arrow or the bullet to do the killing. I felt the pain and loss known only to those who have felt an animal's spirit slip through their fingers. I knew the awesome responsibility of this sacred hunt and the ultimate sacrifice of life giving to life. I would never kill again without feeling this pain and sacrifice. My prayers to the hunt would never be parroted without conviction. I knew the hunt. The trip seemed endless. The demons of my mind swirled like clouds. So many questions unanswered, so much guilt, so many crushing and debilitating emotions. I tried desperately to make sense of it all. The tears and sobs were endless. My heart felt as if it were ripped from my chest, and there was no way out of my pain. I had lost a friend, a brother, and I couldn't really justify his death. Would it not have been the natural order of things to let him die of starvation this winter? Why do we have to be the caretakers? And how can I be a part of this sacred cycle if I felt so much pain? In my mind, I was denying that humankind was a necessary and intricate part of things, regardless of what Grandfather was trying to show us to the contrary. As I walked up the path to camp, I caught sight of Grandfather leaning against a tree watching me. In a way, I hated him for making me kill in this way. As I drew closer, I made no attempt to hide my tears, but gazed right into his eyes. For a fleeting moment, I caught the same glimmer the deer had in his eyes, the all-knowing feeling. He plainly saw my pain and suffering. He sensed the myriads of emotions and questions flowing through my mind, as I know now he must have had at one time. He pointed an old, gnarled finger at me and said, "Grandson, when you can feel the same pain and suffering for a blade of grass ripped from the earth as you do for that deer, you will truly be one with all things." His words hit me like a hammer. The death of rabbits in my traps and plants and trees torn from the ground to feed me had given me no pain in the past because I was removed from the killing. Now I understood fully. To be appreciated and respected, a thing need not be living, breathing, and warm-blooded, or have eyes, and be considered cute. Everything is composed of the same spirit that moves through all things, and all equally sacrifice their lives for our lives. The only difference is that up to this time, I could not feel the pain of plants. I could not hear them scream or see them bleed. It wasn't that we should give up killing deer or animals because they're like us, but that we should realize that we are a part of the spirit that moves through all things. Everything is equal if we listen with our hearts and not our minds. Ever since his words were spoken, I have been on a quest to find the oneness of which Grandfather spoke. Over the years, I have found that oneness. I have learned to feel the pain and to hear voices of all living things. I know that all things are equal and should not be judged on some man-made merit system or evolutionary ladder. Beyond that, I have learned that everything is composed of that spirit. Water, earth, sky, and wind, they all contribute life. Every part a piece of an overall puzzle. Everything necessary to the whole. When something is needlessly killed or removed from the flow of life, with no forethought or feeling, then it is part of all things that are dying. We move within the realm of creation, and creation moves in us. There is no inner or outer dimension. Our quest should be to break down the walls and learn to be one with all things.